Okay, so welcome to our second part in lighting. Today we're going to be dealing with multiple lights. Multiple lights for a still life, and also you guys will be selecting one of the reference images from a portrait guide that we've got a link to inside the activity. And you will be using a head that we give you for portrait. So you need 3 parts today. One is the Project 3. That will contain the still life, the reference, the templates for it. Project 3 head scan project folder. That will contain the very dense head mesh that we supplied for you guys. A little creepy because it's a male. He's got his eyes closed and looks dead. But we do have a material on that object already. So this part's really important. The head scan, we've got pre-material for you. Plus it also has a skin texture on it. It also has subsurface scattering on the skin, so light shows through the ears the way it would normally. So do not replace it with PXR surface, or else you will come up with a corpse. It will look like a corpse. Project 3 Portrait Template PSD Guide, because this is completely different than the still life templates. The head and the reference are going to be side by side, whereas most of your stuff is top and bottom. We usually put our reference at the top and your render goes at the bottom. All right, Discord office hours will be Tuesdays, Thursdays, basically 10 to 4 on Discord, 10 to 12, and then 2 to 4 physical office hours. On Thursdays, we have our open lab go to training, optional. Frank runs that. We ran it yesterday. We only had about 4 people show up. Not mandatory. It's from 1 to 5. The sign up is inside each of the activities that we have. So today's soft light direction is king, always. And also we get to use light linking. That enables us to link specific lights to specific objects. So if we have light or shadow coming from a source that kind of gets in the way of the composition or is not necessary, we can actually unlink it from different surfaces. All right, any questions before we go? Anything not clear from last time? Okay, quiet. All right, so common lights used in photography are one of 2 usually. And these are the most common. One is called a spotlight, which is kind of why we had you guys play around with the disc light. And the other is called a softbox. Now, the difference between the 2 is pretty much just superficial. Here is what they look like. So, spotlight on the ground. Okay, provides a focused cone of light. Spotlights can also have a hood in front of them called a softbox. It basically turns that directional spotlight into a very soft, broad surface or broad shape of light. These are used all the time, whether it's environments, whether it's still life, whether it's portrait. They provide very nice, soft, diffused light. All right, so the image that we showed right here, that is the final version of this setup right here. Okay, so 3 lights besides all the other light bleeding from all the other places. This is actually our offices over in 505. This is the back. So you can see we've got normal plastic, like Full Sail type tables that we have. Throw paper on it to kind of diffuse the light a little bit. We've got a light on the floor to provide the sunburst behind it. That is a spotlight. The cone's open pretty wide, but not completely 180 degrees. And then we have two soft boxes on either side. Now, soft boxes are usually used for portraits and also whenever you've got metal or glass or something very reflective, because it shows the shape inside the reflections, which is how you get these broad shapes on the side of this metallic bottle here, and also how you get the shapes inside glass. Any product shoot that you see is probably shot with a soft box. Just think of any perfume bottle, wine bottle, they always show it with those rectangular shapes in the reflection. Why? Because it's a lot more interesting than little dots of light where spotlights would be. Broad shapes create nice reflection. Think of any car advertisement you've ever seen. Do you see little splotches of light all over on the car? No, you see big, broad shapes. They usually take spotlights and they shine them through reflectors that are similar to the soft boxes to get the shape over the car that shows form. So, back here, they each have their own place. So on the left, same light direction, same camera, same shutter speed, everything. I took the pictures. On the left, okay, soft light, soft box, soft shadow. On the right, exact same position, softbox hood came off. Notice, what do you see about that shadow? It's darker. It's also not quite as soft, it's not as spread out. It's got harder edges. So, diffused light, more direct light rays coming down. Take a look at the surface on the top of the drive. What do you notice between the two? On which one? Yeah, more detail on the right one. So if you're selling this on eBay, you're probably going to choose the one on the right because it shows some surface detail on the top. All right, so hard light, in addition to being a small light source creating hard shadows, also shows surface detail a little bit more because the rays are more directional. Whereas diffused light, since it's coming from multiple directions, kind of washes that out almost. Now, this comes to a point about portraits. So which one of these do you think is going to be the most flattering for skin? Soft one, yeah. Think of any proactive commercial or any commercial with skincare products. They always show you before and they show you hard light. It's like every nook and cranny, you can see every pore, every blemish on the face. And then the next one after you magically use the product and a soft light and they're glowing. Yeah, that's because it's, they spend a lot of time powdering the face and also using soft boxes. All right, so just remember, anytime in reference, when you guys go ahead and you start working on your environments and you're going to start working on materials and you're going to work on textures in the environments, if you've got surface detail, make sure, if you want it to be shown like your reference, you want to make sure that you've got the proper light hitting the surface at the proper angle. Because if you have soft light where hard light's supposed to be, you're going to wash out some detail. It's not going to be as visible as you want. Make sense? Questions? Anything? All right, so soft light, cinema, goes for games also. All right, it is basically meant to not draw attention to itself. Film noir, hard lights mostly, very dramatic, pools of light, light and dark areas. Okay, here, gradients, lots of gradients. Soft light is just merely meant to be a supporting part of the story. Right, so that could be one of your key phrases to describe soft light is gradient. It's always a nice transition between light and dark. Take a look at the walls. Where the light kind of fades into shadow toward the ceiling, that is a soft transition. Soft light. So usually we don't think of fluorescent lights as being very soft, but these have diffusers on them also. They're reflective backs. They've also got those little diffusing panels, kind of look like ice cube tray dividers. All right, that's all meant to kind of disperse the light. It doesn't make it too soft, like putting those kind of very milky panels in the ceiling, and it lets a little more light in. Also, in CG, this is one of the key elements to us creating believable light. We have to give the audience relatable story, relatable characters, relatable environments, relatable lighting. Or else they're not going to buy into our little fantasy world. The whole idea is giving them an anchor that they have that is a reference point. All right, so got a couple resources. This first one is actually very simple, very logical. You can download it. All you have to do is click on the link. It'll take you to the reading inside Safari Books Online, the Digital Lighting Compass Guide. So, everything that we talk about light direction is always based on where the camera is in relation to the subject. We talked a little bit about that portrait of Gary Sinise, where the key light was coming from, where the fill light was coming from, where the rim light was coming from. Whether you know it or not, that was all based on his position to the camera. We were looking directly at him, so the camera was in front of him. So Gary Sinise, camera, which direction was the key light? Anybody remember? Let's see. So I heard somebody say to the right. Looks like Gary dropped off. Where'd he go? Come back. There we go. Wow, my Mac is wigging out. All right, so camera, subject, yes, to the right. Dead to the right? Like full on right? Yeah, probably closer more to 3/4. Or this 45-degree angle. Right here. So, if key light's coming from there, where would fill light be coming from? Yeah, probably the left side. It's usually opposite to the key. 45 degrees left or somewhere in there. And rim light, where would that come from? Back left. 180? Possibly, but let's take a look at the reference. So I heard back left, right? So if it's 180, we would probably have light over here also. Yeah, probably back left, like the 135. And again, this is just a guide, and we don't break it down into 45-degree angles. It doesn't really matter. but at least you've got a starting point somewhere in the upper left. All right. So the next resource we have for you is from Digital Camera World. The link will take you to this image, and that you will need to download directly from their site, because legally I cannot give you that reference because somebody else owns it. But it is posted for download, so you can go there. I can send you there and you can download it. So the link for this is inside the activity. All right, there's your compass. Down here under resources, free portrait guide. So it is a JPEG, and you think to yourself, so what? It's so small. How can that even be remotely useful? Well, when you get it, open it up, and show it at actual size, you find out that it is plenty big enough. All right. So, we're going to do a little, well, we're actually going to go through these images and talk about them. Light direction, the type of lights that are used. Because you are going to select one of those as reference for the portrait. So I told you it looks like a corpse. One of those for your reference. But, here's the caveat. One of those that you choose needs to have multiple lights. It can't be a single light source. Single light source was last project. Now you need to have at least 2 lights.
Do we have a maximum?
Nope. As many as you need. I will tell you that this is the maximum right here. So, let's start off simple and talk about, first off, the great thing about using digital camera guides and digital camera sites, photography sites, is photographers are more than happy to share with you what they did and how they did it. There are all kinds of tutorials all over the web. All right, so a lot of these are real simple to figure out. Camera, model, backdrop. Pretty simple. You have that in Maya anytime you've got a scene, for the most part. Anytime you see strobe with a reflector, what kind of light do you think it is? This, but what else would you call that light? You're absolutely right for us. Spotlight, yes. Spotlight. Now, the reason they call it a strobe is because, anybody know? Anybody do photography? Why is it a strobe? Yeah.
Is it flashes?
Okay, it flashes.
No, not flashes. It does a rapid, I don't know.
Like a pulse.
Yeah, that's
Okay. Well, that technically is what a strobe is, but why do they call it a strobe in photography? Well, instead of a spotlight, because it is a spotlight. The reason is it's battery powered, usually. Seems silly, but it is linked up to the shutter of your camera, so that the light only goes off when you hit the shutter. So it's timed perfectly to capture the amount of light. The longer you have your shutter open, the longer that light stays on. That generates a lot less heat than having a spotlight that is on all the time on your subject. Especially if you're doing food, that stuff will melt with some of the spotlight. Anybody here ever see how they do actually like Burger King, McDonald's commercial stuff? Yeah, they smear all kinds of like glycerin and on honey and syrup. They use motor oil because it's much better consistency, gives a better look. It's totally unedible.
I know they put like glue instead of milk in cereal products or
Yeah.
something.
Not too far apart from reality.
What's that?
Yeah.
So it's all about look. It doesn't have anything to do with reality, to be honest. I mean, face it. In CG, what that we make is actually real. Unless you print it out in 3D. Nothing. Everything is virtual. Right? The name Maya, anybody know what that means? Besides it crashes all the time? So yeah, it was a civilization. However, Maya is also Sanskrit for the word illusion. That's why they chose it, because Maya got its start in visual effects. Illusion.
I should have just called it illusion. It sounds cooler.
Yeah, but Maya sounds cooler.
No, it makes me angry.
Yeah, I got illusion. I have illusion 2018. Okay. I think we have a vaccine for that. All right. So, strobe with reflector, spotlight. Strobe with a honeycomb. It's basically a simple little bit of a diffusion, sort of like our ceiling fluorescent lights up there. Breaks up the light just a little bit instead of it being a harsh glare. All right, so strobe with the snoot. Yeah, it sounds like a South Park word. All that's doing is focusing the cone angle of the strobe or spotlight. We can do that simply because we have cone angle. You can make it smaller, you can make it bigger. Those, you can't adjust those. So you buy adapters to fit on top of them. So all that means is this is a very small, focused beam of light. Then we get into strobe with a softbox. It's basically a spotlight with a softbox hood on it. Meant to diffuse the light rays out of the spotlight so that the pattern is more open. That's it for the direct lights. Spotlight, softbox. Everything else is a reflector. A lot of times they will use reflectors instead of fill lights. So, silver reflector, that is going to be a harder, smoother surface, so you're going to get more direct light rays bouncing off of it. They're not going to be as diffused as what's called a shoot-through white brawling. Okay, this you're meant to shoot through to provide light, and it will also reflect light too. So it's kind of a twofer. Over here, silver brawling, it's a same shape as the shoot-through, has a black back to keep the light rays from passing through, and it's all reflection. They all provide slightly different looks. Now, another great thing about working with photographers is they will usually provide you with a diagram, which is really good when you first start lighting. It's nice to know roughly where the position of the light is. As far as intensity, you're on your own as far as guessing, but you've got reference to kind of let you know. Something else about using real reference from real pictures in photography is that while the photographer may be able to get that look with a single light source, In CG, we may not be able to do that. Just because we don't have all of the energy that we do set up in CG that you get for free in the real world. All the light that bounces around this room. And there's a lot still in the back. It's dark, but not completely black. You can still see detail, you still see color, you can still basically read back there if you had to. All right. So, a couple other things. Photographers were inspired by fine artists like Rembrandt for portraits. Rembrandt was a portrait painter. That was how he made most of his money. Doing portraits for royalty. So he developed a style that is used today in photography. He would oftentimes, if you look at some of his works, he would often have his subject over by the window. Because, face it, they didn't have spotlights, they didn't have strobe, they didn't have soft boxes when Rembrandt was around. They had candles, but it would take like 6,000 candles to be as bright as one of our light bulbs now. So they had to wait until they had enough light during the day. So, single light source. This is spotlight with a softbox. So essentially, a softbox for us would be what kind of light? What kind? Yep, rectangle. He's got all the answers. Rectangle. Absolutely. So the spotlight, we already decided this light would be perfect for that because we can turn that into a spotlight. So, what position is the light in here? So there's the camera, there's the subject.
45 degrees to the left?
Yeah, roughly 45 to the left. Yeah. That'd be a real good place to start. So something else you want to take a look at too is, does the light face directly at the subject? So it kind of glances across the subject's face, but it is not, the center of the light is not pointed directly at the subject's face. So it is designed to throw this pattern of light across the face. Now, placement of the light, placement of the shadow is really important. Things that you need to look for when you're trying to match reference like this is, what kind of landmarks on the face make for good places to check shadow alignment, shadow direction? The nose, yep. You can tell, does the light go straight across the nose? Does the shadow go straight across the nose? Nope, it is down slightly. So what does that tell you? Where is this light located in relationship to the face? Probably up a little bit, off to the side. Yep. And also, care was given to make sure that the other eye, the eye on the dark side of the face, is not thrown into shadow. So everything very deliberate here. Single light. Not only illuminating the model, but also illuminating the backdrop. Okay, next one. How about the position of the light? Same position, right? All they did was take off the softbox, put the shoot-through brolly on, and you can see you get a slightly different look. A little bit harsher. Not quite as diffused as the softbox. Still have roughly the same shadow pattern, but a little more energy coming out of it. The backdrop is brighter. A little more light across the face in general also. So for us, if we want a little harsher, a little more direct light look, what do we do to our lights? Okay. Directly in the middle? And yeah, this is sort of off center though, the same as the other light. Kind of glances across the face.
We increase the intensity.
We can increase the intensity. What else can we do? Depending on how your shadows look, we can scale our light. If the shadows need to be harder, which direction do we scale the light? Smaller. Remember, small light, hard shadows. If we need softer light, we scale the light larger. So it's roughly the same portrait. So here, exactly the same thing, roughly same position, bigger icon though. Spotlight with the honeycomb, but this looks a lot more like film noir. And you can bet those guys took notice of stuff like this, because Rembrandt did a whole bunch of stuff that was very film noirish in his day. So we have a lot more stark differences. Now, if you look real closely, if you've downloaded this, you'll notice the backdrop is not completely black, even though it may show up black on the screen. There's enough light back there where you can make out a silhouette around the subject. However, dead giveaway that this is hard light should be that shadow. Look at the difference between that shadow and this one, especially the nose on the face. Much more refined, much more detail. All right, so last one here on this row. Light is more or less in the same position, but flipped backwards. And now we've just got a silver brolly. This is all bounce light. So what does it do compared to the first one? Over here on the left, what does it do? Now take a look at the backdrop. Yep, a little bit brighter. How about the skin tone? I mean, she's really fair to begin with, so it's, it's pretty stark when you can notice that much more light hitting the skin. Yep, much paler. Something like that is what you use for mood. You don't always have to use makeup to make somebody look sickly. You can put way too much light on them, too bright, and it kind of washes out any skin tone that you see. All right, so same direction, but slightly different result. All right, so the difference between this and the one above it, a little more angled up, more towards like 60 degrees rather than being 45 degrees. And also over the shoulder shot. Our guy can't do that because he's a corpse. If you want over the shoulder, he turns, that's it. There's no muscles, he's not rigged. So roughly same kind of shadow look. Okay, Rembrandt broad. Kind of a model turning the head, sort of a 3/4. So you're seeing more of her left, our right side. Also light coming from that direction. Okay, split. Where's this light coming from? From the side. Split. Why? Because it divides the face into half light, half shadow. Half light, half shadow, enough light hitting the backdrop so that it basically separates it from the backdrop. All right, same shot, this time with a fill light. And the fill, in this case, is a reflector. Now, in CG, we can certainly use reflectors, but a lot of times it's much easier and much more controllable to use another light. So anytime you've got a reflector here, that just means it's another light. And what kind do you use? Take a guess, probably based off the shape that you're given. If it's a round reflector, you probably use a disc light. If it's a square, rectangular one, you probably use a rectangle light. Just whatever happens to work. So while none of these would be adequate for today's exercise, this one would, because this one basically is two separate light sources.
Is there like a XR surface that, or like a material that you could use as a reflector?
Well, you can make the material reflective. We'll get into that when we get into materials.
Okay.
That's lecture 5. So we take lighting, we do rendering, we take lighting, then we get into materials. Once you guys are a little more comfortable with lighting, then we start adding shiny stuff. But yes, you can. So if it works, you can do that. But a lot of times when you use a reflected light, it's indirect light. It tends to be noisier than direct light. So that's kind of why we choose an extra light rather than just a bounce card. But in your scene, you're going to have, when we start putting reflective materials in, you're going to have light bouncing around everywhere anyway. All right, so split short, basically same kind of thing as just the short. You're just dividing the face in half. Side light. Split broad, same thing as up here. Little more to the side, creating a little more shadow on side of the face. All right, close. Notice it's close enough where it wraps more around the subject's face. So much brighter here on this side, less intense here. Again, less light hitting that side of the face. So almost like having a fill light in there, but not quite. All right, Keith with far away softbox. Basically, light's able to spread more into the environment, illuminates a little bit better. Flat light, well, let's go over here first and do the loop. So the loop, this is basically, it's roughly about 30 degrees, not quite 45. It's pretty much just straight on, right at the subject. Butterfly, this is front light. Flat light, those are basically two key lights, one on either side of the face. While it shows off good detail, what does it do for depth? Yeah, it's kind of very flat. It's 2D-ish looking. The backdrop all of a sudden starts to come forward too much. Right, so everybody loves this one because it's very moody. So it's basically flat light, sent around to the back. And creating that kind of badger wedge of shadow in the center of the face, right at the forehead. Badgers are notorious for having that kind of dark patch or light patch, a rectangle or a triangle on their head, their forehead. Right, now, one thing about this light is in CG, we may have to bring that more around to the front than what the reference shows here. Because remember, you're going for what does it look like. In the real world, you may be able to position them slightly differently, but for us, we're going after the result, not necessarily physically accurate. Well, I got my lights in that spot, but it's not doing the job. Well, you have to move them so they do the job. All right, so remember, anything with 2 lights you can do, at least 2. Clamshell, top and bottom, kind of flat, a little bit like the butterfly, but virtually no shadow under the chin. Okay, a loop. It's basically key light, backlight. Backlight aimed at the backdrop, creating a real nice light burst behind the subject. Where is the center of the backlight at? Well, in relationship to the model. Yeah, probably right down around here because that's where it's brightest. A lot of people look at this and just think behind the head. But what you want to do is forget what you know, go with what you see. Take a look at where the brightest area is behind. So, just enough to separate subject from backdrop. Here, same exact lighting setup, light flipped around, now we've got a rim light. Now, that rim light shows dead center behind the model's head. However, what do you see in the actual image? Yes?
It's only noticeable on the right of her?
Yep, only really noticeable here. Notice you kind of get the light going through the ear. That is what we call subsurface scattering. You guys know what subsurface scattering is? You probably have all seen it. So, take a light source, put it behind your hand. Light rays penetrate the skin. The deeper they go, the more they scatter. There's enough energy to make it all the way through. Okay, but not nearly as much energy as that. Right? So as the rays go deeper and deeper, they scatter more and more, and they pick up the color that's inside. Yes?
I used to do that all the time in hopes that I would see my bone clearly, and I never could.
No, I know, you never
I
can.
was so upset. I was like, God, I can't
I used to
see
just
it.
pretend I was ET or something.
Oh, I did that too.
That was the case.
I did that too. I did both. I'd be like, E.T. bone. Wait, do I have a bone?
Yeah. Yes. So, that is what subsurface scattering does. The ear is thin enough. The ear has cartilage in it, not bone, so it's even easier for light to get through. Noses are kind of the same way. I mean, you say we break a nose, but there's really no bones that make it. It's all cartilage. And cartilage is usually pretty soft. So, yes, it is noticeable on the right side. So, again, you have to go with what you see. You position your lights, probably 35, 45 degrees left for the key. You start with your rim light in the back, but you can guarantee you're probably going to be swinging it around to one side to get the light to look like that. Now, as far as the size of the cone, it's probably going to be pretty focused because you don't want it so wide that it covers the entire head or it starts to spill over the shoulder too much. Also, One thing to note is we are giving you a male character. So the landmarks on the face are going to be completely different. The male's going to have a broader, squarer jaw, a broader nose. So some of your shadows are probably not going to be exactly the same, but they should be close. Because there's still a nose, there's still two eyes, there's lips, there's a chin, there's a neck, there's a little bit of shoulder. All right, again, talk about nose shadow. Where does that tell you the light is? So is it up or down? It's left. Okay, it's up a little bit. Because the shadow does come down slightly. But definitely not as much as over here. All right, so same lighting setup here, except now we've got a reflector. So high key light simply means there is very little shadow, little to no shadow. Low key light would be lots of shadow. So high key, white backdrop, pale model, light hair. So this could easily become completely blown out. You just have to watch something like this, very careful with how you place the light. All right, so basically here, this would be 3 lights for us. Rectangle light, you've got a disc light for a spotlight in the back, and then you've got probably another disc light as a reflector off to the side. Disc light, the other disc light would not be set up as a spotlight. All right, so key and fill. Notice the fill, which side's the key? Left. Notice the fill light is a little bit further away to back off some of the energy. Spread it out a little bit. Minimize shadow. Same layout, except they call it a hair light, but it's really kind of like an accent light or a kick light on the hair. Not quite a rim, because all it's doing is highlighting the right side, top of the head, the side, a little bit on the ear, a little bit on the forehead on the side. Right, so hard key light, that's front, bottom right. You can tell, look at the glare on the face. You have hard spot areas here. And lots of light behind the subject. So this one, which one is the key light? So which one on the left? The reflector. Why is that the key? Well, I mean, you could have said any light, but you still have to defend your decision. All right, but does it emit light? So, first off, let me make sure. You're talking about this one or this one? What's that? This one. All right, so this one is a reflector, so it's really not going to be, it's not going to emit light itself. If you were to turn this light off, this one probably would not be working too well. It'd be bouncing color light. But, to be honest, the two of them play together. But the reflector actually has kind of a hidden role, which is not really visible immediately. All right, so we're going to go with this one being the key. Where's the fill?
The red
Okay, we got this one and we got this one.
one on the side, not behind it, because that's a rim.
Okay, so that one's a rim. How do we know? Well, take a look at the side of the head and the side of the body. So this, you're right, would be the fill light. The blue light back here, that's just for the backdrop, just to give it a color. Now, whenever they say gels, they don't go and change the bulb. They put clear colored, non-flammable plastic in front of it that's translucent. You can see through it. All right, so let's go back to the reflector here. Got all this red light coming in. The reflector's job is to keep the rim off the front of the face. Yes?
I remember during an art project in high school, we had to take a picture and have a color going through, so we used a saran wrap, like
Yeah.
plastic wrap.
Mm-hmm.
That's all we could find.
Did you put that in front of the camera or in front of the light?
The light.
The light. Was a flash or a real light?
I don't remember. I don't
Okay.
remember.
That's good for a short period of time.
Yeah, we couldn't think of anything. And I was like, oh wait, I know. And then I got random plastic wrap and it worked.
Good. Yeah, that would work. The thing you have to watch out for, some of it is flammable.
It was not spending in like 15 minutes, so we were.
You couldn't have started a fire. Yeah. All right.
It was fun.
Yeah. So something that's clear, preferably non-flammable, and colored, anything would give you that effect. All right, so this light right here, or this reflector, keeping that rim light off the side of the face too much. So it's really kind of just supporting any light that's kind of bleeding off to the left, putting it back on the subject. So for us, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lights. Possibly more if you can't get the results with just 5. Remember, just because it says 5 or it says 3 or it says 2, if you're not getting the results using that number of lights, you can add more. It's all about the look of it, the final result. Does that make sense? All right, so download that. Now, another thing about this is you're going to pick out which one you want to do, and then you're going to open it in Photoshop. Because you're going to crop out the reference you want to use. And when you crop out the image that you want to use, that goes into the template. So when we get around to demo time, since we're in Photoshop anyway, which one should we do? Can't do the first one because the...
The last one.
All right, so everybody likes the last one. Yep, good with that? All right, so who here does not know how to crop in Photoshop? All right, so the crop tool is usually the 5th tool on the left side. Anytime in Photoshop you've got a little triangle in the bottom right, that means there are additional tools that function similarly to the main tool that's displayed. You can usually right-click to get them. When you select a tool, across the top you will have what are called tool options. Think of them kind of like attributes that you get in Maya. They are just some settings that you can change in the tool. So right now I've just got mine set for square, which means however I use this crop, and let me zoom out a little. Now in Photoshop, in case you don't know, you can zoom out using Command plus and minus. You can also, if you are zoomed in and want to pan around, if you hold spacebar, that will give you the hand, and then you can just move stuff around. So you can zoom all the way out to there, or all the way into Pixel World, right there. And you're lost in a sea of pixels. It's like being stuck in a forest. You can't tell it's a forest because there's too many trees. All right, so the last one. So if I try to bring this down, move it around. Oh, don't want to do that. Want to bring it down. Yeah, that's not working because it is constrained to be square. So basically, I just wanted to change it to width and height, so I can line it up myself. What do I want to do here? I want to get as close as I can to the little dotted lines that kind of act almost like border edges. Right, now, when you want to complete an operation like cropping in Photoshop, what do you do? Yep, we can hit enter. We can also hit this little checkbox up top here that will commit your current crop operation. And there you go. Don't forget to do a save as. That way you don't lose the original image. So save as. What kind of image format do you think we ought to use? Targa. Yep. Targas are usually what we use, what we bring back into Maya. So we're going to use Targas. Trouble with TIFFs is every once in a while they will squeeze the pixel aspect ratio depending on what the format of the image is. Also, there is compression issues sometimes. Too much compression with TIFF depending on type of compression you use. So TGA or Targa files work pretty well. Now when you get Targa options, 24-bit should be just like you're using for the templates. 24-bit means we've got RGB channels and we don't have to worry about alphas at this point. All right, so there we go. This is it at 100%. So I'm going to quit. And I'm going to basically rename this and drop it into my folder. Alright, so there's my colored gel. And when we get into doing demos for it, that's what we're going to guinea pig.
So where do you find those portrait things? Like what in what file?
Go into the activity, scroll down to resources, and the link is right there.
I was thinking of the
Yep, no, I can't legally give that to you because they own it. But I can send you there. All right, so don't forget light elevation. Higher up your light is, your shadows are going to be shorter. The lower your light is, the shadows are going to be longer. Rotation also will do sort of the same thing depending on the light type you have. Light position, where is it in relationship to the subject? Now we get into light linking. This is where we can link up specific lights to specific shapes or pieces of geometry. All right, light linking, it's a very simple premise. Light linking can be found in the relationship editor. It's under Windows, relationship editor, light linking, and you have two choices, light centric or object centric. So let me fire up Maya and we'll take a look at it. All right, so Windows, relationship editors, light linking, light centric, object centric. So I could create a plane and a sphere, or I could just open one of our scenes that we're going to work on today and just give you a quick go through there, which kind of makes more sense because then it gives me an excuse to talk about what you guys are going to work on. So the same kind of drill that we had with the last project, you're going to be assigning Pixar surface to everything in your scene. And here are the two scenes. You're going to choose one of these. You've got the rabbit, which is sort of set up like a portrait, but it's a still life. And then you've got the actual still life, traditional kind of bowl of fruit, cup, candle kind of thing. All right. How many lights are in the rabbit?
Key light, and a lamp.
So key light. Oh, come on. There we go. Right, so you said key light. What else?
That's a ring light.
Okay, it has a rim light.
I don't think it has a feel light.
Okay.
I think it only has two.
All right, only has two. Not a bad guess. We'll take a look at it. We'll compare it with what we actually have. How about the still life?
The still life has a spotlight in the behind the.
Okay. So the rabbit actually does have three lights. There's a key light. There is a fill light. It's pretty dim, but it's there.
In the background?
And a key light, or a rim light. So it has a key, a fill, and a rim. The still life has a key light. Which direction? Which side? Okay, to the left. Fill light from the right. Got a backlight behind the fruit, and there is also a light back here to separate the candle from the backdrop. So that one has 4 lights. All right, so when you download our little packet that we give you guys, which is this one right here, You're also going to download the head scan and also the portrait. All right, so when you download the main body, which is going to be the still life portion, get your project folder. There are 2 scene files. Minus the ones I worked on last month in class. We'll get rid of those. We'll hide those. There we go. So you get 2 scenes. You get what's called the Cornell rabbit. So why is it called the Cornell rabbit? Anybody know? Anybody ever hear of Cornell University? All right, if you haven't, you should, because Cornell University was one of the pioneers of computer graphics in the 1970s. They also had a lot of firsts. They studied radiosity, which means how light and color bounce from one surface to another. They came up with our global illumination models that we use today. They also did the first point cloud scan, and that's what the rabbit is. If anybody knows what a point cloud scan is, it's basically they go around the object with a flat scanner, and every point of light that hits the surface becomes a point, and then they take all those points and they triangulate them to each other. So they create a mesh based on the points. It's a whole big complicated algorithm to basically connect all the dots. So that's the story of the Cornell rabbit. Still life, no story there. Boring. What's that? We could make one up, but it's not that much fun. All right, so you're going to choose one of these. To do, let's go back to our folder. So there are no source images for this. We don't have any images to worry about that are outside the environment. This is simple, direct light for the most part exercise. You've got one Photoshop template to worry about. You just pick the reference that you're going to do down here under the render section. So if you're going to do the still life, just turn off the rabbit. Drop your render down in there. You're all set to go. Reference images. We've got separate reference for the rabbit and for the still life. All right, so we give you reference images. Some of them are PNGs. That's because they are screenshots of position for lights and camera. Just to kind of give you an idea of where things are. So kind of an overview, top-down shot, camera, subject, key light, fill light, rim light. Then we also give you breakdowns. Breakdowns are what individual lights look like by themselves. All right, so, yep, we are actual size. Ooh, with terrible banding. Ugh. That looks awful. All right. So, that is what the key light looks like by itself. Key light only. Then we have fill light. Very dim. And then we have the rim light. Notice anything about the rim light?
Just kind of accents the edges.
Yep, accents the edges. Do you see it hit the ground at all? This is where light linking comes in. So we can unlink the rim light from the backdrop so we don't get unwanted shadow and unwanted light on the backdrop. Because you can see that the rim light goes all the way to the feet of the rabbit. The rabbit is sitting on the surface of the backdrop. Unless we unlink it, that's going to be visible. So we unlink it to break the connection. Every time you make a light, it is automatically linked up to everything in your scene. If you make geometry, it's automatically linked up to every single light unless you tell it otherwise. And then all the lights together. And that's pretty much how we're going to be doing all the lighting this month. Breakdowns. What's the main light doing? What are all the other supporting lights doing by themselves? Or a lot of times we'll just pile it on top of the main. In the beginning like this, we give you separate lights so you can see exactly what each one's doing. That way it makes it easy for you to position it, to get the right intensity, to get the right look. And then, if you've done each one of these lights by themselves, individually, when you go to turn all the lights on, you should get a result very close to that. Right, so the other scene. Here we go. So again, positional reference for you. Key lights off to the left, fill light to the right. There's your backlight aimed at the backdrop. And here is a sphere light just to separate the candle from the backdrop. So here's your key light reference. There's your fill light reference. Kind of hard to see up there. There's your backlight. There's your sort of a rim, kind of a back. And then all the lights together. All right, so let's see. Let's pick one of these lights or one of these scenes. So somebody pick one. Okay, anybody else? Rabbit? All right. So let's take a look at the rabbit. So first thing I want to do is set my project. Right there, set, file open. I want the Cornell rabbit. So once I get this open, what should I do? Say it again. All right, yep, let's take a look. What's assigned to it? Lambert, absolutely. So we can assign the same Pixar surface to both. So I'm just going to marquee both of them. What's the shortcut for assigning new material? Shift T, very good. So assign new material. BXDF, Pixar surface, or just go into the shelf because it's a whole lot easier. And then what do we need to do once we have assigned the Pixar surface? Change the color to what? 0.5. There we go. Absolutely. 50% gray for your value. So if I hit 5, there we go. Flat light. Now, at this point, I should also do a save as. All right, I'm going to go into perspective. And let's kind of talk about how to approach this. So there's a couple ways to do it. One is I could create my light, work side by side with my reference. I could do a lot of it into the viewport. That might work. To be honest, it's probably easier if I do it in the image tool, because then I can load my reference into the image tool and compare back and forth between reference and render. And also it'll allow me to move the window off to the side, and I can move the light around in perspective, be completely independent of where I'm rendering from. All right, so let's take a look again here. So we did all this, 50% gray. All right, so we're going to set, I set my project already, opened up the scene file, work on one light at a time. So key light, which is Pixar rectangle light. And again, if I forget, I can go and use my reference, which is right here. I can tell position. I can also tell shape. All right, so Pixar surface, assigned. Pixar rectangle, created. What's an easy way I can aim this light?
T.
What T key? That is, brings up the interactive manipulator that allows me to take my locator and position it at my subject. And there's my light. So I'm going to work overhead, take a look at, just roughly position my light based off my reference. So it looks like my light is definitely closer than my reference. So if I follow the little pointer in the center of my light, looks like it goes almost to the middle of the rabbit's back, sort of like that, but definitely closer. Also looks like my light might be a little too high. Oh yeah, way too high. About the size of my light. I haven't even looked at the reference as far as what it looks like with light on it, but just looking at the positional guide. Size of light? Yeah, it looks too small. So I'm going to scale it up a little. Now, what happens if I scale a light? Yeah, so let me just render this out real quick in viewport. So if I scale it, it gets brighter, which I don't want. So what I want to do is go in, normalize under advanced. Now I can scale it up. And I can also add some intensity. So just enough for now, just so I can actually see the light work. All right, going to stop that. Let's take a look. Maybe a little better. So again, super annoying that as soon as you aim your light correctly, Pixar goes and changes it on you as soon as you deselect it. Thank you, Pixar. All right. So positionally, not a bad start. I'm going to save. It's always a good idea, rename your light so you know which one you're working on. So this is going to be my key. You can also do this in the outliner if you desire. There's my key light. Okay. So now what? Well, let's open up the image tool, load in the reference, and do a render from the render cam. When in doubt, render from the render cam. It's kind of hard to go wrong. So file, open file, find your reference. There's my key light. I'll load it in. There we go. And I'm going to do a test render from my render cam and see how close I am. So just using those positional guides, this is my first render. Yeah, there's some differences. Looks like my shadows are a little on the short side. Yeah, it does. Especially down here. Back of the rabbit. Alright. So, let's see. What can we do for that? So if my shadows are short, what do I have to do with my light? See, I'm going by that shadow in the front paw here. So if my shadow's too short, what do I have to do? Well, if I pull the light back, that's not necessarily going to fix the length of my shadow.
Like if the object is right here and the light is right here, and the shadow casts it down there.
Okay. So let's take a look at that though. Now, if I do that though, what will that do to my reference here? Alright, so let's pull it back a little bit. Actually, that didn't do too bad. The front paw's not too bad. However, now my shadow is leaning more towards the back. So what do I need to do to correct that? Yeah, so I want to push it back in this direction a little. Alright, that is a little bit better. So just me moving my light actually did pretty good for the rabbit itself here. All right, so one other thing, what do you notice about the shadow from the body? Too dark, kind of spread out a little more than the other one. So if my shadow is too big, what can I do to fix that? There's two things actually I could do. If you remember, here's my hand really far away. And as my hand gets closer, my shadow gets spread out more. Or, what's the other thing I could do? I could scale my light. So which one do I choose? Probably scale the light, because if I move my light back any further, I'm going to be much further away from the subject, and that's also going to affect how light it is close to the subject. So good. So let's try and scale that light down just a little bit. All right, let's kick off. I stopped my IPR just because I give it a break. All right, so I'm scaling my light down, but it really is kind of wreaking havoc on my shadows again. So it's probably going to be a combination of me pushing the light maybe a little bit closer to the subject. Go back to my reference here. So if you find yourself getting further and further away from what you had, one thing you should do is anytime you think you're close and you like what you've done, save, continue on, This way, if you can't undo all the steps that you did to get back to where you were, you've at least got a version saved where you were happy. Now, when you're working, what I want you to try to do is get to about 80 to 85% of the way there. Everybody hear that? 80, 85%. Stop. No, but it's not perfect. Yeah, I know. Save it. Work in passing. Here's what's going to happen. If you obsess over the key light, will you ever finish it? No. Never. Because we're never happy as artists with anything we do. So you stop. You force yourself. You go to the next light. You put your key light on a layer, turn that layer off. Start working on the fill light. Get the fill light about 80, 85%. Some lights you might get closer than others. Stop. Then go and do the rim light. Get about 80, 85% of the way there. Stop. Then go back and take a look at the key light with fresh eyes. So, stop. Close for now. Good to save. Throw it on a layer. And turn that layer off. Load in your next reference. It's going to be the fill light. So I know it's really hard to see up there, but if you have go to training, you should be able to at least get a pretty decent shot, or hopefully you're using reference yourself. All right, we save, we stop, and let's load up the positional reference for this time fill light placement. So fill light, how about size compared to what we just did with the key? This is your fill light. How's it compare? Higher up than the key light. What else do you notice? I said size. Smaller. Yep, smaller. It's higher up. A little bit. Further away, too. So, one more rectangle light. Time to rename that rectangle light. It's going to be fill.
It would just say, like for the naming convention of the light, would it just say, you just put fill underscore and then XR rectangle shape?
That's what I do. You can also do it inside the outliner, like I said. All right, so there is my fill light. Positionally, it is more towards the front of the rabbit. And let me move my locator into position here. It's up a little too high now. All right, so let's take a look at it from the top view. And let's render it out, see what we get. So I haven't done anything. So a little bit different. Looks like my light comes around on the front of the face a little bit more than the reference. You can see the shadow on the side of the rabbit's face. So for that, I just bring it around here a little bit. All right, how about intensity? Anybody? Mine looks a little bit brighter than the reference. Don't forget, normalize. That way, if you decide to scale your light based on what your reference is, it will not change intensity. All right, let me drop this down a little bit. When you don't know how far to drop the intensity or decrease it, just try doing half of whatever's there. If it's too much, you can always come up a little bit and split the difference. Yeah, that's a little dark now. All right, so pretty close. Save your scene. Put it on a layer. You're about 70, well, about 80, 85, maybe even 90% of the way there. Throw it on a layer, turn that layer off, and start working on the next one. Don't forget Maya hates spaces, by the way. Turn that layer off. And the next light is going to be the rim light. So rim light's going to be pretty low. It's also going to be a disc light turned into a spotlight. All right, so disc light. So that looks like it's going more towards the back, sort of like I have here. Right, so let's see what that does. First off, load in the reference. Rim light. There we go. So that's what it should look like. I should get that right out of the box, right? Well, sort of. So there's my rim light. Perfect, right? All right. So there's your A right there. So what do I need to do? That's right. So to do that, first off, name your light. That way it's easy to find in the light linking tool. So this is rim. Let's stop that from going. Go back to Maya. So Windows, relationship editors, light linking, light centric, object centric, pretty much does the same thing. The only difference is object centric shows you your objects on the left side, lights on the right. Select an object, it tells you the lights it's linked to. So for example, If I go in and select my backdrop, notice it is linked to all the lights. Now if I go into light linking, I could go, what is my rim light linked to? All the objects right here. Now, a lot of times when you do this, you may actually click on it and it may be too dim. So here, if I look at it and I expand it, now it's working. Let me close it again. Light linking, rim light. So what are you linked up to? Well, you should be linked up to that. So notice that the group is highlighted, but nothing inside. Just click on it again and it'll highlight. So I want to unlink this from the backdrop. So all I have to do is click on it once, and it is now unselected. When you have a light selected and any geometry is not highlighted, that is automatically unlinked from the object. So now when I render this out, the light will ignore the backdrop. If I want to put it on again, all I have to do is click on it and it's linked back up. Unlink. Go back here. Unlink. Stop that. And linked. Make sense? Questions? Right, so take a look at my light. Couple differences here. Let me get rid of that. So right away you should notice intensity is pretty low. Also, have I turned it into a spotlight yet? No, I haven't, but I'm getting decent results, so maybe I don't need to. But I do need some more intensity. How much? Let's double what's there. Nope. I'm going to double it again. Getting closer. Double it again. Yeah, probably could go a little brighter. Let's double it, see what happens. Sort of close. Little soft. So what I think I'm going to do is turn this into a spotlight. So let's get that cone angle, swing it around a little bit. Now notice if I make it too small, what happens? I cut the ear off. A little better. All right. You guys notice any difference between the reference and the other ear? What else? The leg. Yep, how about the tail? So, position. Okay. So let's compare it with what we have already. No. I don't know, position's pretty close. If I move the position, it's also going to change how it affects the body of the rabbit. Anybody else have any guesses? How about whenever you create a light, what do you get on the opposite side of the light? Shadow. So, one of the tricks that we can do in CG, which you can't do in the real world, is turn off shadows on the rim light. That way the rabbit will now not self-shadow itself. So if I select the rim light, go under shadows, turn off enable, and re-render, so now I have light on the tail, on the back leg, on the back. Now it's going to be a little easier for me to go in and reposition my light, because now I've got more points I can refer to. But my light position is pretty close. Yes?
Do you know if the final render will have the decision cells where it doesn't cast anything?
The final render will have that. Take a look.
Just turn it back on when you're done referencing or checking the reference.
Nope, because this is what the reference is. Remember, the references are breakdowns of what each finalized version of the light looks like. So here, got that little bit of light right here on that back leg. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is just kick off the render again, try and position that light a little bit better, because it's coming around to the side just a little too much. Alright. Alright, so let's try and move this light a little bit closer to the rabbit. Push it back just a little bit. Alright, so it is a little bit better. Not coming around to the front a little as much. Position's off just a little bit, but save it. Put it on a layer. Remember, 85%. Come back to it with fresh eyes. So at this point, it's always a good idea to turn on all lights and put the final reference in there to see how close you are. Right, so let me load in the final reference here. I know I still have some work to do on it, but let's turn all my lights on and re-render. This way I can kind of get an idea, get a feel for how close I am with it. Yeah, it still needs some work.
Do you know how to brighten the background while still keeping like the darkness of the rabbit?
That's going to be position. How close the light is to the rabbit. If you put the light closer to the rabbit's going to get brighter. Also, the backdrop is going to get a little bit brighter too.
I just need the background to be darker.
Well, that's why you're going to have to play with the distance. Are you using the positional guides?
Yeah, I try to get it as accurate as possible. It's still, as far as light goes, the shadows are great.
All right, so how about scale? How does your light compare with the scale that's visible in the positional guides? See, mine needs to be brighter also. That's why I stopped at 85%. All right, so what am I going to do now? I'm going to turn off all my lights except for the key light. I'm going to go back, readjust the key light a little bit more, go back, turn that off, double check the fill light, turn that off, go back and adjust the rim light. Just keep doing that one by one, little by little. Does that make sense? So it's going to make it a lot easier than just trying to work or obsess with a single light at a time. All right, questions? So it is going to take some work getting it. You're not going to be able to get this done in like 5 minutes, especially if this is the first time you've been doing it. All right, so this is a good time to take a break. So save up what you're doing. Save versions of what you're doing also.